The United States is a country rich with natural beauty and human history. A nation so naturally diverse, there's bound to be a number of stories that develop in the country's lands. Cryptozoology has only officially been a practice since the 1950s, but telling stories of the beasts who may roam your land is said to have existed as far back as 1500 BC. This map, created by Cache Map USA, depicts which cryptid is most popular in which U.S. state. Intended to be a compendium of the most famous beasts in each U.S. state, that is precisely what this video will act as. This is the comprehensive list of each state's most popular mythical creature. Starting in the south, Alabama's White Thing might not be a name familiar to many, but it's clearly one that the residents within the heart of Dixie have become aware of. Since the early 1900s, there have been sightings of a creature with thick white hair, nearly 8 feet tall, and glowing red eyes. The beast can move fast, and its scream is similar to that of a woman's shriek. Its scent is said to be foul, akin to that of a skunk. White Thing seems to frequent a triangle formation in the state, with many reports coming in the areas between Binghamton, Gadsden, and Huntsville. Though this beast sounds familiar to that of Bigfoot, it seems it would be more appropriate to refer to it as a cousin or distant relative. Some residents say their grandparents would speak of seeing glimpses of an animal as children. It does not appear that seeing White Thing is something people should strive for. Reportedly, it seems to be a harbinger of death if the folklore is to be believed. Those who have witnessed White Thing claim it's only times of mourning, or preceding a passing. An eyewitness by the name of George Norris once claimed to see White Thing walking through Enon Graveyard in Winston County. If White Thing is to be associated with death, it is rather unfortunate, as legend says the cryptid does not have an interest in hurting humans. While infrequent, there have been a few recent sightings. ABC affiliate WDHN, located in Dothan, released a short news story about the, quote, strange sightings in rural Coffee County, in late September of 2020. 2 workers in the county heard from ATV riders of a strange animal in the trees. They reported a shriek, asking the local community to keep an eye out for any strange animals and try to photograph it for evidence. Prior to that, a small team camped out in the woods of Coffee County, spending a handful of nights to hopefully find this Bigfoot-like creature emitting a terrible smell, though they ultimately found nothing. Reports of White Thing are few and far in between, but who knows if there is something unusual roaming the hills of Winston. Also known as Palrayuk, the first accounts of the Tizheruk were recorded by Roy P. Mackle in the book Searching for Hidden Animals, an inquiry into zoological mysteries. According to the locals of King Island, a sea monster known as the Tizheruk had been killing hunters in the area. The appearance of the Tizheruk is partially a mystery, as the residents have only seen the head, neck, and tail. Some accounts claim the sea monster to be something similar to a large caterpillar with a head of at least 7 feet in length. There is some credibility to the claims of these sightings as well. Members of the Coast Guard spoke about unusual animals in the Bering Sea that were a rare sight. According to them, the natives had, quote, attached mythical and religious significance to them and were afraid of them. Common tales of the Tizheruk tell of how the beast would often grab people from the docks, pulling them to their deaths. One account even said it capsized a boat, resulting in the death of the woman inside. The Tizheruk bears some similarities to Ogopogo, the lake monster of Lake Okanagan in Canada, as well as the Haitlik of Nootka folklore, leading to the concern that these threatening monsters may be living deep within the cold waters of the continent's northwest. From the waters of Alaska to the mountains of Arizona, our next cryptid is known as the Mogollon monster. This is the first monster on our list to have an extensive amount of information written about it, and by extensive amount, I mean that it has its own Wikipedia article. The late cryptozoologist Don Davis claimed to have come face-to-face with the monster in the 1940s as a Boy Scout. The following was Davis's account. The creature was huge. Its eyes were deep set and hard to see, but they seemed expressionless. His face seemed pretty much devoid of hair, but there seemed to be hair running along the sides of his face. His chest, shoulders, and arms were massive, especially the upper arms, easily upwards of 6 inches in diameter, perhaps much, much more. I could see he was pretty hairy, but didn't observe really how thick the body hair was. The face head was very square sides and squared up chin, like a box. Stories of the Mogollon monster have not been peaceful throughout its history. Perhaps the most famous account of this tale speaks of Sam Spade, a pioneer who built his home near what is now known as Camp Geronimo. That was the intent, as he was attacked by the beast. Later on, Spade and his bride-to-be were killed by the monster on the day that they were set to be married. The Spade Ranch is a notable structure of Camp Geronimo, having stood for over a century. Nowadays, the story of Sam Spade and the Mogollon monster is told to the Boy Scouts that pass through during summer camp. The earliest known recording of the Mogollon monster comes in the beginning of the 20th century. In 1903's edition of the Arizona Republican, I.W. Stevens described the creature he had an encounter with. It had long hair and a matted beard that reached its knees. It wore no clothing. Upon its talon-like fingers were claws at least 2 inches long. There was a coat of gray hair that nearly covered his body. Here and there a spot of dirty skin showing. It was drinking the blood of 2 cougars, and screamed the wildest, most unearthly screech. It seems Arizona had taken a liking to their state's unofficial mascot, as there's even a 100-mile trail race known as the Mogollon Monster 100 that has its participants run through the Mogollon Rim. The monster seems to have its origins in Native American folklore as well, some claiming that it's the soul of a deceased chief, exiled before his death. Another that it's the soul of a white man who was executed for the murder of a native woman. Whatever its story, it seems the beast is not kind to those it encounters. Yet another relative to the Bigfoot, the Fouke monster, is Arkansas's own slice of the Sasquatch family. In the mid-1800s, a few articles in local publications reported on a large, hairy creature that several had claimed to see. Depictions from the 1970s speak the being to be a tall creature, about 7 feet tall and weighing in between 250 and 300 pounds, although these can range to up to 10 feet in height and as much as 800 pounds. Similar to the white thing from Alabama, the Fouke monster is said to emit a horrible odor, likened to a skunk or wet dog. The most prominent sighting of the Fouke monster came on May 2, 1971. The Ford family had more than just a small run-in with the cryptid, having a full-on battle with the Fouke monster that resulted in the story making headlines and officials looking for some mysterious beast. The attack took place just prior to midnight on Sunday evening. Elizabeth Ford was asleep when something woke her from the window. At first, I thought it was a bear's paw, Elizabeth told the Gazette, but it didn't look like that. It had heavy hair all over it, and it had claws. I could see its eyes. They looked like coals of fire, real red. It didn't make any noise, except you could hear it breathing. When her husband Bobby Ford finally saw the beast near the rear of the house, Ford said, "We shot several times at them," and then called Ernest Walraven, constable of Fouke. He brought us another shotgun and a stronger light. We waited on the porch, and then saw the thing closer to the house. We shot it again, and thought we saw it fall. As the men of the family approached what they thought was the fallen beast, Elizabeth screamed, and the group returned to the house. Walraven arrived at 12:35 a.m., searching the area, but to no luck. The constable gave the family his shotgun before leaving. They had apparently used it to shoot at the beast again, and this time Walraven remained at the home until morning. This wasn't Walraven's first rodeo with a monster like this either, as a resident of the Jonesville community too reported a mysterious monster. Several persons saw the thing and shot at it, Walraven said. They said nothing seemed to stop it. They described it as being about 7 feet tall and looking just like a naked man covered in brown hair. The only proof of the Fouke monster were tracks and scratch marks outside of the homes. Its legacy, however, is much different. The Ford's battle with the beast was adapted into the docudrama The Legend of Boggy Creek, grossing $20 million. Since then, a number of movies about the incident and beast have been released. Similar to Arizona, Arkansas too celebrates their state cryptid, as the annual Fouke Monster Festival is celebrated every fall, celebrating the lore of the beast and the others like it. I had been expecting to see Fresno's night crawlers on this list, so I was a bit surprised for the Dark Watchers to be California's entry. As Katie Dowd of SF Gate writes, when the Spanish arrived in the 1700s, they began calling the apparition Los Vigilantes Oscuros, and as Anglo-American settlers began staking claims in the region, they too felt the sensation of being watched from the hills. Author John Steinbeck mentions these strange creatures in his story Flight. Pepe looked suspiciously back every minute or so, and his eyes sought the tops of the ridges ahead. Once on a white baron's spur, he saw a black figure for a moment, but he looked quickly away, for it was one of the Dark Watchers. No one knew who the Watchers were, nor where they lived, but it was better to ignore them and never show interest in them. They did not bother one who stayed on the trail and minded his own business. John's son Thomas Steinbeck too claimed to see the Dark Watchers as a child, spending some time with Benjamin Brode to write In Search of the Dark Watchers, exploring the lore of these mysterious beings. Many reports of the Dark Watchers describe them as tall, bordering on giant creatures between 7 and 15 feet tall, as observed from a distance. They are featureless silhouettes, often seen around twilight and dawn. These mysterious creatures simply watch over travelers in the Santa Lucia Mountains, disappearing if any were to get too close. In the Rocky Mountains, the deadly slide rock bolter is said to exist, swallowing groups of humans up in one quick swoop. This whale-like creature is quite unique in its appearance, with a split tail sporting 2 hooks at its ends, as well as a wide, hinge-like mouth capable of swallowing trees, boulders, or even people inside as it slides down the slopes of the Colorado Mountains. As the lumberjack tale goes, the land whale searches the San Juan Mountains, waiting for its next meal to wander through. When its small eyes spot a human entering its path, it unhooks its tail from the mountain's peak and dashes towards its target, demolishing anything in its path. One ranger is said to have gotten the best of the slide rock bolter, who had been terrorizing the area near Rico. The ranger stuffed a dummy tourist full of explosives, positioned just the right way for the bolter to take notice. When the bolter attacked, the explosion nearly wiped Rico from the map, but did finish off the bolter. It's unknown if the ranger killed the only bolter in existence, or if there are more just waiting for their prey to appear. Fairfield County, Connecticut was once home to an asylum for the criminally insane, an asylum that burned down in the fall of 1960. The occupants of which lost their lives, but some of the inmates were never found. They were said to have lived through the fire and fled into the nearby woods. The reliance on cannibalism during the cold New England winters, as well as inbreeding, helped to form melon heads through their deformities. They are said to be small, but with oversized heads thanks to hydrocephalus as a result of their mutations. The tale of the melon heads dates back to the 1980s. A group of high school girls heard of the legend of the melon heads, and Friday night after a school football game, they decided to hop into one of their cars and search for these creatures. They drove to Velvet Street in Tramble, leaving their blue Ford Granada unattended. As they searched the forest, the car revved to life. The last thing the girls were able to see was the blue Granada racing towards them, with small figures behind the wheel, large heads, raggedy clothes, and an eerie orange hue for eyes. A number of people say that the blue Granada still drives around to this day. Nowadays, the melon heads mostly keep to themselves, avoiding the populated areas of Connecticut. However, if a lost hiker or wandering teen find their way into their territory, the melon heads won't hesitate to meet their next meal. A legend arose of a creature that stalks the Great Cypress Swamp of Selbyville, Delaware. A fire that burned for 8 months ravaged the land in the early 1900s, giving way for the tales of a burnt swamp monster. The beast immediately was to blame for the devastation of the fire. Missing pets and Esteve's livestock were blamed on this mysterious new being. Accounts of the monster were drastically different per encounter. Some describe it as a very hairy, Bigfoot-like creature. Some say it's more ghostly in nature. The Salisbury Times of Maryland once wrote, quote, The monster story started Friday night, after a carload of 5 high school girls reported seeing a hairy, moaning creature, half man or perhaps two-legged animal. Several others and at least one adult have reported hearing the moaning sound, and some claim to have seen the creature. The story begins to falter thanks to a man named Fred Stevens. Donning his aunt's coat, Fred hid on the roadside near the swamp. When cars would pass by, he would jump out, baseball bat in hand, impaled with a railroad spike. Of course, scared drivers would tell others about this encounter, making the legend spread with ease. Fred came clean in 1987, and most were willing to throw their hands up and call it a day, as do most of the cryptozoology community. Although reports of a swamp monster in Delaware can be found from nearly 100 years ago, there just might be something beneath the murky waters of the swamp after all. The Seminole and the Miccosukee tell tales of a peculiar creature in Florida swamplands. Sometimes called Etsi-Kepkaki, the creature has been reported as far back as the early 1800s, where a supposed man-sized monkey stole from grocery stores and stalked fishermen. Things would begin to get interesting just over 100 years later, as it seemed the state of Florida would have an unofficial war declared on their very own cryptid, known widely as the Skunk Ape. A pair of sheriff's deputies from Palm Beach County allegedly opened fire on a supposed ape-like creature that followed the duo. Later in the 70s, sightings would begin to ramp up, with locals reporting a tall ape creature with dark fur. Newspapers began to pick up the story, containing the phrase skunk ape and telling tales of how it was reportedly breaking into homes and killing livestock. Though it failed to pass, legislation was written to outlaw the act of, quote, take, possess, harm, or molest anthropoids or humanoid animals. This was in response to gangs coming together to hunt down and fire at the skunk ape. The creature hasn't fallen out of favor with the Floridian people either, as most of the states still report sightings of their smelly friend over the last decade. Like many states on this list, Florida has used the skunk ape as an unofficial mascot. Gatorland, a zoo located in Orlando, used the ever-elusive cryptid to help teach the public about social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Emptying into the Atlantic Ocean is the Altamaha River. One of the largest in the state of Georgia, it may be large enough to house the Altamaha-ha, a sea monster that was affectionately nicknamed Alti. Alti's legends date back even further than the 13 colonies. The native legend describes the sea monster as a giant snake-like creature that hisses and bellows. A report from April 13, 1830 is written in the Savannah, Georgia newspaper, where multiple sightings of a massive sea monster were recorded off the coast. A sea captain aboard his boat claimed the monster was about 70 feet long, with a head similar to that of an alligator. A recent account from the early 2000s described the cryptid as being, quote, over 20 feet in length and 6 feet wide. Judging by the vast range in sizes, it may be safe to assume that if Alti is out there, she's certainly not alone. On the islands of Hawaii, there are said to be groups of helpers that build masterpieces around the state. These small beings are known as Menehune. They're described as dwarves, generally between 6 inches to 2 feet in height. These little creatures are not the monsters of the night, as many in this video have been. The Menehune legend dates back centuries, said to occupy the islands long before Polynesian settlers set foot on its beaches. They are said to be fond of bananas and fish, and even don magic arrows that they aim at anybody with a sour attitude, the piercing of the arrow bringing love and joy to their once angry souls. But moreover than that, they are best known as skilled craftsmen, able to create boats, infrastructure, building, and in single nights. It's believed that the Kikialoa Ditch, an irrigation system that pulled river water from the Waimea, is attributed to these little elves. It's also said that they created the Alekoko fish pond in a single night. However, if humans were to spot the Menehune working after dark, the project would be abandoned. Legend says that the Menehune disappeared soon after the first settlers arrived, but many believe these helpful creatures are still around, hiding in the woods of Hawaii. In native folklore, there is said to be an evil spirit that rests beneath the water of Payette Lake, located in McCall, Idaho. As far as recorded history goes, it wasn't until the 1920s that a logging crew spotted something in the middle of Payette Lake. They thought it was a log, but it soon disappeared beneath the water's surface. A few decades later, a sighting of a monster that was, quote, at least 35 feet long with a dinosaur-type head, pronounced jaw, humps like a camel, and shell-like skin was what made the beast famous. Locals at the time referred to this beast as Slimy Slim, but it wasn't until the mid-1950s when the Star News held a national contest where the name Sharlie was officially picked for the lake monster. Those sightings within the last 2 decades have slowed, with no official sightings reported since 2002. In April of 1973, a panic swept through Enfield, Illinois. A man by the name of Henry McDaniel claims to have heard something clawing at his door. Fearing it to be a bear or some other wild animal, Henry grabbed his gun and a flashlight. It was there when he saw the Enfield monster. It had 3 legs on it, Henry described. A short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stood 4.5 feet tall and was grayish-colored. It was almost like a human body. Henry opened fire at the monster, with one hitting the monster and causing it to, quote, hiss much like a wildcat. The beast was quick, allegedly covering 50 feet in only 3 jumps. This encounter with the Enfield monster would not be Henry's last. On May 6th of the same year, McDaniel contacted WWKI, a radio station, and claimed that he'd seen the creature in the early hours of the morning. When a crew that included the news director of WWKI investigated, they allegedly saw an ape-like creature in an abandoned structure near McDaniel's residence. This prompted a group of men to travel to Enfield in hopes of hunting this beast down, with all arrested on hunting violations. The 5 had carried weapons in hope of catching this monster. Though there was an effort to hunt down the Enfield horror, no beast was ever brought to light. Near the turn of the century, in 1898, a farmer by the name of Oscar Fouke had spotted a giant turtle that had made a home in the lake not far from his property in Busco. Though others were told about the monstrous snapping turtle, the topic was soon swept to the wayside. It wouldn't be until 50 years later that the beast would make its next appearance. Ora Blue and Charlie Wilson, residents of Churubusco, reported seeing a 500-pound alligator snapping turtle in the same lake as Oscar Fouke. At the same time, farmer Gale Harris owned the property, and he too had reported seeing a massive turtle around his land. A reporter published the story of a monster in the lake near Churubusco, giving national attention to the lake, drawing tourists from all over to Harris's farm. Though there were many eyes, no proof of the beast of Busco was ever found, regardless of how many efforts Gale Harris made. In the modern day, Oscar, as the beast has now been named after the original witness, it's celebrated annually in the month of June with carnivals, parades, and even turtle races. In the fall of 1903, the citizens of Van Meter, Iowa were visited by a terrifying beast. Half human, half animal, with enormous smooth bat wings flying about, as it was described, letting off an awful aroma that blinded any witnesses with a bright light originating from its head. A group of men banded together with their weapons, determined to hunt down this horrifying visitor. The group was able to force the Van Meter monster into a coal mine, but that was when they discovered that it was not the only beast. Another monster emerged, and both it and the original visitor disappeared into the night. The group of hunters fired off their weapons, but their bullets seemed ineffective. Ever since, the monsters would never be seen again. Every year, the event and the visitor are honored at the Van Meter Visitor Festival, held every September with tours, food, and guest speakers. Seemingly fresh from the mind of Frank Herbert, Kansas natives tell the tale of a prehistoric freshwater beast 15 feet in length that was set free during a flood in the early 1900s. The first sightings take place in the Big Sinkhole, a particularly deep section of Lake Inman. 2 men by the names of Albert Newfield and George Rager spotted the giant freshwater worm. Albert made quick work of Sinkhole Sam, firing off a few rounds from the bridge he was standing on, or at least he tried, as the bullets seemed to have no effect. Ever since, there had been a few people to report seeing Sinkhole Sam, but none with ever any evidence. To this day, you may still see visitors pulling over near Lake Inman, gazing into its waters in hopes of finding something swimming beneath. In perhaps one of the most well-known cases of run-ins with the paranormal, a Kentucky family in 1955 reportedly went to war with invaders from another planet. One August evening, a large group stumbled into the Hopkinsville police station, declaring that they had been fending off aliens on their farm with guns for the last several hours. They declared that they had battled over a dozen of these figures. A rather large armed presence was dispatched to investigate the Sutton family home, consisting of police, sheriff's deputies, military police, and state troopers. Upon their arrival, nothing was found on the battlefield, aside from the spent ammunition and holes in the home that they had made. Though the search turned up empty, it seemed the Hopkinsville Goblins did not deny the family a second fight. Neighbors the following morning stated that the family had abandoned their home, as the creatures returned in the middle of the night. The local and national press ran with the story of a family defending their homestead from the, quote, little green aliens. The descriptions were given that these creatures stood between 2 and 4 feet in height, had large pointed ears, claw-like hands, eyes that glowed yellow, and spindly legs. Like many of the other creatures in this video, the city of Kelly embraces this piece of lore and celebrates with their annual Little Green Men festival. The Bayou's take on the legendary werewolf, it's likely the tale of this cryptid originated from the French settlers, as the tale of the Lougarou dates back to the days of medieval France. The beast is said to have the body of a man and the head of a wolf, and stalks the swamplands around New Orleans. The Rougarou is not a peaceful mind either, as it will often hunt and kill those who have become the subject of the story. Parents may say that the Rougarou hunted down unruly children, while more religious tales tell of one that tracks down Catholics who break the rules of Lent. Another legend speaks of a curse that lasts for 101 days, with an ordinary human turning into the blood-sucking beast when the moon rises, hunting down victims to consume their blood, only to share their curse with that soul. One way to defend against the Rougarou is to place 13 items near your doors. The beast cannot count past 12, and this will confuse the beast until sunrise, allowing you to safely live through another night. Clarence Duffy was a hunter near Lobster Lake, Maine. In 1891, he saw what he could only describe as a massive white moose, an encounter he would share only to be laughed out of the room. It wasn't until a second account of this mythical moose was reported by lumberman John Ross that people would take this legend seriously. A hunter from New York would witness the same beast not long after. He took several shots at it to seemingly no effect. The moose, enraged by the hunter's actions, charged at the man, who hid for an hour before the monster let him be. A similar incident would happen in 1892. New Yorker Howard Van Ness and his group of hunters entered Maine. Van Ness, separated from his pack, spotted the moose and fired a round that hit the beast. Again, the moose was angry, charging at Van Ness, who, too, lucked out by hiding until the monster's rage had subsided. It was said to stand up to 15 feet tall, weighing around 2,500 pounds, with antlers 12 feet across and with over 20 points on each side. The Specter moose was also said to glow faintly, seemingly disappearing and phasing through objects. It helped explain why shots fired seemingly had no effect. Several decades later, a group of hunters was said to have successfully killed the large white moose near the Molunkus stream. After they had cut the Specter's throat and hung it for dressing the next day, it had completely disappeared by morning. The following evening, the beast returned to the site, disappearing when the hunters attempted to shoot at it. It seems even in its finest attempts, this cryptid refused to be captured. To rival Loch Ness's Nessie, the Chesapeake Bay reportedly has its own sea monster lurking beneath its waters by the name of Chessie. First sightings date back to the 1930s, but the first detailed glimpse came in 1943 from fishermen Francis Klarman and Edward J. Ward. This thing was about 75 yards away, at right angles from our boat. At first, it looked like something floating on the water. It was black, and the part of it that was out of the water seemed about 12 feet long. It has a head as big as a football and shaped somewhat like a horse's head. It turns its head around several times, almost all the way around. A popular sighting came in the 80s, where Bob Frew supposedly captured video evidence of Chessie. The telephone pole that swims, Frew starts. Not like a snake. There were 4, 5, 6 of us here. We all saw it. It went around the other side of the island, up the rocks to a place called Cloverfield. It was a commercial artist there that sketched it, and it was exactly what we saw in the film. The most recent sighting was on April 5th, 2014. A man reportedly saw Chessie up close to his car when the tide was at its highest in the Magathie River. It was described to be up to 30 feet in length, no fins, a slender football-like head. The man reportedly did not think to take a picture, as he was so taken aback by what he had just seen. In the spring of 1977, a teenager by the name of Bill Bartlett spoke of a strange creature he encountered standing atop a demolished wall in Dover, Massachusetts. This large-eyed creature with tendril-like fingers and glowing eyes was reportedly seen by several other teens at the time. 15-year-old Abby Brabman saw the Dover demon on Springdale Avenue, while John Baxter, also 15, saw the demon on Miller Hill Road. The trio provided sketches of what they saw, with Bartlett even adding the sentence, "I, Bill Bartlett, swear on a stack of Bibles that I saw this creature," to the bottom of his drawing. No further sightings have been reported of the Dover demon, leading to a mystery of what it could have been that those three teenagers saw on those 2 evenings. Popularized by the song DJ Steve Cook recorded, the Michigan Dogman was a legend in the state, first officially reported in 1887. The description of the Dogman goes as follows: a 7-foot-tall, blue-eyed canine with the torso of a man, with a howl that sounds like that of a human scream. The beast only arrives every 10 years when the year ends in a 7. The first sighting was from lumberjacks in Wexford County, but the first violent interaction came from Robert Fortney. In Paris, Michigan, in 1937, Fortney was allegedly attacked by a pack of dogs, all moving on 2 legs. After Steve Cook released his song as an April Fool's joke, he received many calls from those who had encountered a similar beast to those he described. He stumbled upon the legacy of a cryptid that goes back to Native American legend. If the legend is to be believed, reports of the Michigan Dogman could begin making the rounds come 2027. One of, if not the most popular legend on the list, the Wendigo is a creature originating from natives in the Great Lakes region. Described as a spirit, the Wendigo is said to be a spirit that possesses humans who commit acts of cannibalism or to invoke the feelings of such an act. In some legends, a human who allows themselves to be overpowered by the feelings of greed can turn into one. A human may also turn into one if they find themselves in contact with some for a long period of time. In appearance, a Wendigo can look different to those who observe it. Some versions have spoken of large heads, standing 10 feet in height with twisted mouths. Others have them described as being hairless creatures with sharp fangs and razors for talons. The most common depiction is that their bodies resemble a rotting corpse, with heads like a deer and antlers on top. A Wendigo needs not to hunt for their prey, but rather they possess a terrifying ability. They can easily mimic human voices, luring unsuspecting people into isolated areas like forests to feast on the victims. The story of Swift Runner is perhaps one of the most terrifying examples of a Wendigo possession. A member of the Cree, Swift Runner murdered the entirety of his family in 1879, tallying 6 victims total. Swift Runner then cooked and ate the bodies, being hanged for his crimes in Fort Saskatchewan. If you hear a voice calling for help near the woods, remember that it may not be human at all, or at the very least, not human anymore. A pair of fishermen were sitting on the Pascagoula River in Mississippi on the evening of October 11, 1973. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were on a pier, lines cast when they heard a strange sound, something akin to whirring. They then noticed flashing lights and a massive metal object, described to be 40 feet across and 10 feet high, flying above them. The men claimed to be abducted, conscious throughout the event, but unable to move. The aliens were described as creatures with robotic slit mouths and crab-like pincers. A third witness by the name of Maria Blair came out to meet Calvin Parker to speak about the abduction. Though Charles Hickson passed away in 2011, Calvin Parker says that he still has nightmares about the incident to this very day. Adding another branch to the Bigfoot family tree, Missouri's Momo was sighted several times, starting back in the 1970s when a group of children outside of Louisiana, Missouri, screamed in reaction to seeing this beast on their property. A horrible odor, nearly 7 feet in height, a pumpkin-shaped head and glowing eyes, holding a dead dog. This would start a number of sightings, as reports grew so popular in 1972 that angry mobs were formed to hunt down the Missouri monster, with nothing ever being found. Though many years have passed, the family remains in the area. The young boys don't speak on the story, but the daughter who called the police at the time stands by her claim, saying in an interview, quote, "I used to hate talking about it, because people made fun of me and stuff. But now, you can pardon my French, they can kiss my ass. I saw what I saw, and I heard what I heard." The town of Louisiana has embraced the legend, with the local museum even selling Momo t-shirts. The plains of Montana were at the mercy of a mysterious animal that was preying on livestock for hundreds of years. Though it goes by many names, the Rocky Mountain hyena, the beast, and so on, this cryptid is known as Shunka Warak'in, so the natives, a name that translates to carries off dogs due to its tendency to enter camps and steal the dogs. Many in the region didn't know what this beast was until a man by the name of Israel Ammon Hutchins shot one as it came onto his ranch in 1886. The beast's body was stuffed like a trophy by a businessman named Joseph Sherwood, who then kept it as a piece in his museum. The cryptid was a mainstay, even after Sherwood's passing, but the carcass went missing in the 80s. That was when the family got involved, with Hutchins' grandson Jack Kirby tracking down the stuffed Shunka Warak'in in a museum in Idaho. He was able to get the piece back, and though it would soon be brought back to Montana, Kirby first stopped at the grave of his grandfather, to show him what he was able to retrieve the piece of cryptozoology legend. In present-day Hay Springs, there may live a legend that has existed since the natives first told its tale. Known as the Alkali Lake Monster, though it is now known as Warak'in Lake, it is a sea monster that is said to live beneath the waters of Hay Springs Lake. Accounts vary, but the monster can be up to 100 feet long, depending on some depictions, with the number of legs also depending on which version of the tale you hear, though the commonalities of all stories tend to agree on the large horn protruding from between its eyes and an awful stench being associated with the lake monster. In the 1920s, the Omaha World Herald published an interview with one J.A. Johnson, describing the encounter he had with friends where they saw the monster. Though upon the beast noticing the trio of campers staring, it let out a roar before disappearing beneath the water. Though the legend did grow to be quite popular in the area, no attempt at capturing the monster was ever successful. Another one of Nessie's American cousins, Chessie, is a lake monster that is said to live beneath the waters of Lake Tahoe. Amidst all the bodies that are said to line the bottom of Nevada's largest freshwater lake, locals believe there to be Chessie, an enormous creature that swims in the dark, freezing waters. Some claim that Chessie lives in underwater tunnels. Chessie herself is said to be larger than a school bus, with smooth, dark skin. Some even attribute the number of deaths at the lake to Chessie, as well as the dwindling fish population. Capsizes and missing peoples are all said to be the work of Nevada's ever-elusive lake monster. Though many businesses in the area have adopted Chessie to be their mascot, nobody is quite sure if Lake Tahoe is holding some hidden secrets in its cold depths, monster or human. Yet another Bigfoot-like creature, the New Hampshire wood devils of Coos County, were first spotted in the forests of New Hampshire in the 1930s. Similar to Bigfoot, it's said to be the wood devils will stand between 7 and 9 feet with tannish gray hair. It's said these creatures, if they were to feel a human approaching, would hide behind a tree until they have passed. If there was no tree to hide behind, they would simply stand still. They could run fast on only 2 legs, and make screams that haunt the woods of Coos County. One account comes from Evan Lichnowsky, recalling one spring morning with his wife in 2000. They noticed a tall creature before them, but the two of them took a moment to realize what it was that they had seen. By the time they had a moment to process it, the wood devil, if that's what it truly was, had long disappeared. The Jersey Devil originates from a story that tells of a mother in 1735. After having given birth to 12 children, Mother Leeds cursed her 13th child to be the devil. When she gave birth, it was precisely what happened. The child was born ordinarily, but over time grew hooves, wings, and a devil's tail, as well as a goat's head. By the time the child had transformed, it escaped up the chimney of the home and escaped to the trees. This is merely the most popular retelling of the Jersey Devil. According to New Jersey's website itself, there's another story of an American woman who fell in love with a British soldier during the Revolutionary War. Upon giving birth to the child, that child itself was the Jersey Devil. Many sightings of the Jersey Devil have been recorded, even going so far as to have a string of livestock deaths blamed on them in 1840. As recently as 1960, a bounty was placed on the Jersey Devil's head by merchants in Camden, offering $10,000 for the devil to be captured so it could be displayed in a zoo. One of the country's most recognized cryptids, the Jersey Devil has found itself in many aspects of pop culture, even being voted as the name of the state's hockey team, the New Jersey Devils. A Six Flag ride was also named after the famed cryptid, opening in Jackson, New Jersey in 2021. At one point, massive birds flew over the skies of New Mexico, with a wingspan of over 20 feet and weighing in well over 100 pounds. But those creatures were thought to be extinct. The sightings of teratorns within the state beg to differ. Reports from the 1800s claim that these birds were still being spotted near the Dona Ana Mountains. In fact, there's a report from July of 2007 made by Dave Zander, a resident of the area for over 3 decades. Zander claimed that 2 giant birds resembling the reports from the 19th century flew over the mountains, leading to the idea that these extinct dinosaurs that were said to have died out 6,000 years ago may not have truly disappeared altogether. A lake monster with a well-documented history, Champ is New York's lake monster said to reside in Lake Champlain, a freshwater body that borders both New York and Vermont. Samuel de Champlain, the French cartographer after whom the lake is named, is reported to have seen the, quote, 20-foot serpent thick as a barrel and head like a horse, though other accounts of Champ tell him to be much larger. One Captain Crumb was reported as describing the giant monster as being nearly 200 feet in length, with 3 teeth, and the eyes the color of peeled onions. Famous showman P.T. Barnum even placed a reward on Champ, offering to pay anybody who was able to capture the monster for him. Sightings continue into the modern day, with a video allegedly capturing the lake monster, taken by Dick Affolter and Pete Baudet in 2005. Another, more credible sighting is a recording of sounds captured by a research institute working with the Discovery Channel. The sounds are said to be similar to species of whales or dolphins, though neither animal is present in the lake. Champ is important to the economy of upstate New York and Vermont, with festivals being held every summer. There is even a film in production, titled Lucy and the Lake Monster, that began filming in the summer of 2022. In the winter of 1953, there was a string of deaths in Bladenboro, North Carolina, attributed to a creature that had been rather violently killing animals in the region. A wild animal killing domesticated ones is not unusual, but the manner of death was a matter of concern. The beast allegedly drained the blood of livestock, such as horses, while a number of dogs were found beheaded, drained of blood, and bodies crushed. One account from a dog owner recounted the scene he stumbled upon. "My dogs put up a good fight. There was blood all over the porch, big puddles of it, and there was a pool of saliva on the porch. He killed one dog at 10:30, left it lying there. My dad wrapped the dog up in a blanket. That thing came back and got the dog, and nobody's seen the dog since. At 1:30 in the morning, it came back and killed the other dog and took it off. We found it 3 days later in a hedgerow. The top of one of the dog's heads was torn off, and its body was crushed and wet, like it had been put in the thing's mouth. The other dog's lower jaw was torn off." Some were able to catch a glimpse of the beast, with an account saying it was, quote, about 4.5 feet long, bushy, and resembling either a bear or a panther. A hunt began for whatever animal was responsible for killing these pets and livestock. A farmer named Luther Davis found and killed a bobcat near the city, claiming that the beast was killed, but it was brought into question if a bobcat could perform such violent acts against these animals. The search eventually went cold, with the residents of Bladenboro left wondering if such a beast could return for their pets again. Possibly related to New Mexico's Territorn, Native American legend speaks of the Thunderbird, a large, colorful avian capable of causing storms with just the flapping of its wings. Depending on which culture is speaking of the Thunderbird, the abilities may vary. The Algonquin tales say its wings could make thunder crash, while the Iroquois say lightning flashes through its blinking eyes. The Thunderbird is said to be so large in legends that it's believed it's capable of lifting a whale with just its talons, and they remain high above the clouds. Sometimes a Thunderbird can also be a bringer of fortune, as the Winnebagos say a man who sees the Thunderbird in a vision is said to become a war chief. The Seos saw the Thunderbird as a protective being, defending the people from reptilian monsters. The Loveland Frogmen are a bizarre creature in Ohio's lore, seen to be over 4 feet in height and standing on their hind legs. Some versions of the legend even include that the frogmen will stand on dark bridges, waving wands over their head. In 1972, a police officer by the name of Ray Shockey spotted a strange animal cross the road in front of his cruiser. It was described as being between 3 and 4 feet long, weighing in at over 50 pounds. When the creature noticed Shockey, he said it froze for a moment, before climbing back down towards the Little Miami River. When the number of drownings in Oklahoma began to rise, people were searching for answers as to why this was happening. Naturally, the blame was aimed to a freshwater cephalopod. The Oklahoma octopus was rumored to live beneath some of the state's lakes, dragging swimmers down by the legs using one of their tentacles to do so. Unlike squids who require saltwater to survive, there have been some instances of a freshwater octopus showing up every now and again, such as one being found in the Licking River in Kentucky. As far as native legend goes, some have spoken about a freshwater beast living beneath the lakes in the state as far back as 200 years ago. In the Columbia River of Oregon, a first mate on the Columbia River lightship described seeing a large animal with a, quote, neck some 8 feet long, a big round body, a mean-looking tail, and an evil, snaky look to its head. This was reported first in 1934, with only a handful of sightings reported since then. Claude was given another description by the captain of a fishing boat, backing up the claim from a few years earlier. It was a long, hairy, tanned creature, with the head of an overgrown horse, about 40 feet long, with a 4-foot waist. Sightings from then on seemed to die out, with very little to no brushes with the river monster being spotted ever since. If Colossal Claude ever did exist, it's possible he may have swam back into the ocean. That, or perhaps the food in the river, was not enough to sustain his kind. The squonk is a much beloved cryptid in this fair state of Pennsylvania. A quick, unsightly fellow, the squonk was first reported in 1910, giving it a very upsetting description. From William T. Cox's The Squonk. The squonk is of a very retiring disposition, generally traveling about at twilight and dusk. Because of its misfitting skin, which is covered with warts and moles, it is always unhappy. Hunters who are good at tracking are able to follow a squonk by its tear-stained trail, for the animal weeps constantly. When cornered and escape seems impossible, or when surprised and frightened, it may even dissolve into its own tears. It's even said that the squonk would move slowly on bright evenings, wanting to avoid catching a glimpse of its unfortunate complexion in the reflection of water. A very much real event, the Mercy Brown vampire incident, took place in 1892. The Brown family of Exeter, Rhode Island, were unfortunately struck with tuberculosis. Neighbors of the time thought that one of the members of the family was a vampire, as it was folklore at the time that many deaths within a family was proof of vampiric activity. When the surviving father, George, was somehow talked into exhuming his family's bodies by the locals, Mother Mary and daughters Mercy and Mary Olive were all dug up from their graves. Mary and Mary Olive had decayed, as to be expected, but Mercy seemed to be perfectly preserved. As in line with folklore at the time, Mercy's heart and liver were removed from her body and burned. The ashes were mixed with water, creating a tonic that was given to the then sick Edwin to consume in order to fight the curse of the undead. Edwin would succumb to his disease a few months later, and Mercy's body was buried again, with the grave said to be cursed. Rhode Island would become one of the home of vampires in the country, according to legend, with even the author of Dracula looking into the Mercy Brown case during the writing of the novel. In the late 80s, a report came into Lee County Sheriff's Office complaining of a vehicle being damaged in Browntown, South Carolina. The damage reported was tooth marks and scratches, not vandalism normally seen on vehicles. This was what spurred the beginnings of the Lizard Man of Scape or Swamp. A 17-year-old named Christopher Davis stated that he too had his car damaged, claiming to see a monster that was, quote, green, wet-like, about 7 feet tall, and had 3 fingers, red eyes, skin like a lizard, snake-like scales. Davis's story is that as he was changing a flat tire on his car, he noticed the Lizard Man walking towards him. He hopped back into his car to escape, but the beast had climbed onto the roof. Slamming on the brakes, the Lizard Man rolled off, allowing Christopher a safe escape. A bounty was eventually put onto the Lizard Man by the radio station WCOS, offering $1 million if the creature could be brought in alive. To this very day, tourists to the area are said to keep a vigilant eye out if they venture too close to Scape or Swamp to sneak a peek at the Lizard Man for themselves. Like Bigfoot, but a more dapper take, the Taku-hi is a bit unusual compared to the other cryptids mentioned thus far. Similar to Bigfoot, the Taku-hi is a bipedal animal that seems to have a fix for livestock. In 1974, a man by the name of Jim Douglas claimed to see what was described as a very tall, sandy Bigfoot dragging a deceased animal carcass through the woods. It seems the Taku-hi takes its appearance a bit more seriously than the others in its family tree, as the creature can reportedly be seen donning a top hat and coat. Though it dresses as a classy gentleman, its actions are certainly not so refined, reported to tear the genitalia off of the livestock it's killed. Legends of the Tennessee Wildman date back to the 1800s in McNairy County. The original tale described the Wildman as dark fur, 7 feet tall with red eyes, has an awful screech, and the scent rivals that of Florida's Skunk Ape. The tale of the Tennessee Wildman says that it was captured by a traveling showman, displaying the beast to a crowd as part of a freak show until the beast was able to break free from its restraint. Sometimes the Wildman is said to be like Bigfoot, only more human in nature, with some accounts having it as a rival to Bigfoot himself. Recent accounts of the Wildman track it to Elizabethton, where a beast about 9 feet tall, with red eyes and a horrible stench that was likened to that of a dead animal was spotted in the tree line. The 2 witnesses to such a beast immediately made a run for it. Sightings of the Tennessee Wildman are as recent as 2020, with some claiming to hear the sounds that the Wildman makes in the late hours of the night near the woods of Tennessee. It's also reported that the Wildman has taken a liking to the ladies, reportedly having attempted to snatch a few to steal into the forest before it was fought off. One of America's mascots in terms of cryptozoology, the chupacabra, or goatsucker, is an animal that can be traced back to 1970s Puerto Rico. In 1975, the town of Moca reported a large number of dead livestock, having their body emptied completely of blood through bite marks. Another set of attacks are dated in 1995, where a handful of sheep were killed in Puerto Rico, also being reported to have their blood drained from their bodies through bite marks. A witness finally stepped forward, claiming to have seen the chupacabra in the town of Canovanas. The chupacabra is said to be reptilian, leathery skin with spines on its back. It's been sized at about 4 feet, and leaps similarly to how a kangaroo would. Other descriptions liken the chupacabra to a hairless dog. Since the first incidents, sightings of the chupacabra have been reported all around the United States, and have even been reported internationally, such as the case in 2018, where animals were being killed in the chupacabra's fabled technique in Manipur, India. To this day, residents deny claims that the attacks on their animals are done by anything other than the goatsucker, and sightings still arise every so often. Description of Utah's Bear Lake monster vary by account. Some say it's a legged serpent, while others describe it as a 30-foot monster with the head of a cow or other land animal. There are even reports of there being multiple monsters in Bear Lake, meaning that the one that's been reported wasn't the only one. First tales of the Bear Lake monster reach back to the mid-1800s. A Deseret News article speaks of the, quote, strange serpent-like creature inhabiting the waters of Bear Lake. A number of our white settlers declare they have seen it with their own eyes. This Bear Lake monster, they now call it, is causing a great deal of excitement up here. After settlers first reported seeing the Bear Lake monster, sightings began to increase in numbers. Not only in Bear Lake, but lakes all over the state of Utah were reportedly seeing monsters beneath their waves. In the modern day, the Bear Lake monster has become more of a tourist attraction than a cryptid worth hunting for. There was a boat tour shaped like the monster that would offer lore during its 40-plus minute voyage. An 8-year-old girl was even able to officially name the lake monster in 1996, with judges voting her submission of Isabella to be the winner. There are multiple accounts of the Northfield pigmen, but the one with the most depth is the tale of a 17-year-old boy named Sam Harris. On the night before Halloween in 1951, young Sam Harris was set to participate in Mischief Night. Though he went out searching for a night of fun and causing trouble with a handful of eggs, his parents never saw him the following morning. While the townsfolk searched high and low for the missing teenager, he nor his body were ever found. The tale from there tells that the devil himself possessed Sam, turning him to killing pigs. One of these animals he'd hollow the skull of and put it over his own head. To this day, Sam, now known as the Northfield Pigmen, haunts the forests of the state. In some retellings of the story, the pigman has been known to breed with the pigs he had once killed and eaten, creating abominations of children that are half pig, half human. First mentioned in the early 1700s, Frederick County was said to be harassed by something the German settlers referred to as the Schnellergeist. Descriptions told the monster to be a mixture of a bird and a reptile, with traits of sirens and demons thrown into the mix. The Snallygaster could silently steal its victims from the sky, grabbing them with its tentacles and sucking their blood. As time passed, the Snallygaster changed slightly in its depiction, having large wings and a single eye. Such a legend even reached the office of President Teddy Roosevelt, who considered trying to hunt the beast down himself. Though it was originally meant as stories to tell one another, sightings did begin to ramp up in the early 1900s, with sightings and encounters becoming present in local papers. The Snallygaster allegedly had a body count as well, with one story telling of a man it picked up, drained of his blood, and his body dumped on the side of a mountain. While there haven't been any credible sightings as of late, it's hard to say if the Quick Spirit won't make an appearance again. The granddaddy of them all, Bigfoot is a cryptid that needs little introduction. The ape-like beast has been spotted all around the United States, but finds its origins in the Pacific Northwest. Tales of the Sasquatch are centuries old, with some paintings dating back over a millennium showing a large, hairy man. There is a seemingly never-ending amount of Bigfoot sightings, as it's one of the most sought-after cryptids to ever exist. A number of shows have been created with the sole purpose of hunting down and finding this mythical creature. The most noteworthy sighting is, of course, the Patterson-Gimlin film, in which Roger Patterson and Robert Gimlin allegedly captured the most iconic piece of cryptid video on a search for the mythical Bigfoot. Located on Bluff Creek, the minute-long film depicts the walking of a Bigfoot on October 20th, 1967. Gimlin remained on horseback, while Patterson was on foot trying to keep a steady hand as he filmed the beast that the party had been tracking. In total, they were in the presence of the Sasquatch for about 2 minutes, but when the two were able to mount up to track down Patty, the name that they'd given to the beast, they had lost her in the woods. There's no cryptid tale quite like that of Bigfoot. A poll completed in 2020 showed that 1/10 of the nation believes in the Sasquatch. Laws have been placed in order to protect such a creature if it does exist, such as the Skamania County law that threatens a fine of $10,000 or 5 years imprisonment for killing a Sasquatch. With such a history behind Washington's most famous cryptid, it's hard to summarize it all in one small section. Another extremely famous cryptid, the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, has become an icon of the state itself. Sightings of the Mothman started in November of 1966, when a pair of couples reported to police that they saw a, quote, large white creature with eyes glowed red, standing at the road near the TNT area, the site of a former World War II munitions plant. The Mothman was said to be over 7 feet in height, with white wings and a screeching howl. As the couples fled to their vehicles, the Mothman gave chase until they broke the city limits. After initial reports, the Mothman began to gain more popularity, with more sightings being reported just days following the accounts of the first 2 couples. Well over 100 sightings were reported during this time. The most infamous part of Mothman's story is the idea that he is either meant to be a warning of tragedy, or one who brings tragedy wherever he is spotted. As the last he was sighted in West Virginia was on the Silver Bridge on December 15, 1967, when the bridge collapsed, claiming the lives of 46 people. After that, the Mothman disappeared from West Virginia, with appearances allegedly being made in Chernobyl just before nuclear meltdown, as well as pictures of the supposed creature being taken in New York on 9/11. Ever since 2002, the famous Mothman Festival is held on the fall of every year in Point Pleasant, where even a statue has been built to pay tribute to the legend. To go hand in hand with neighboring Michigan, the Beast of Bray Road acts as Wisconsin's werewolf legend. It first made its appearance back in the mid-1930s, but its rise to popularity wouldn't come until the 80s. This was when locals reported scratch marks on their vehicles after passing through Bray Road. One even mentioned running something over, and when she stepped out to investigate, a large werewolf was staring at her, scaring her off. It seems that humans weren't the only ones that the Beast of Bray Road had its eyes on. Animals, both wild and domesticated, were found brutally killed and partially consumed around the area. Sightings continue to the present day, with several people claiming to see a bipedal wolf-like creature in the areas around Bray Road. In a fitting, almost sad ending to the video, the final entry is that of Wyoming's own jackalope. Throughout history, there were a handful of accounts of a rabbit with horns, similar to that of unicorns. It appeared in Renaissance paintings and historic writings, documenting these odd creatures as fact. According to legends, jackalopes are far more dangerous than their jackrabbit counterparts. One tale says that, quote, hunters are advised to wear stovepipes on their legs, to keep from being gored. It also said that these creatures can imitate human voices, such as those camping out may hear a jackalope imitating their voice much like a parrot. The unfortunate part of the legend comes from 2 brothers making a quick buck. Douglas and Ralph Herrick returned from hunting jackrabbits one day, and being owners of a taxidermy shop, they set the rabbits down beside a pair of antlers. The idea formed to combine the 2, and the jackalope was born. Selling the fake beast, it soon became a creature that many would come to see, and the brothers would charge people to make them their very own jackalope. Even though the creature was born out of hoax, it seems that many would rather choose to believe. One of the brothers even said, "People get real mad if you tell them there's no such thing as a jackalope. They take it very seriously, and why make people mad?" If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Also, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel as well. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.